Hello, this is Michael David Cobb Bowen, and this is Cobb Vision. I'm thinking about coming to consciousness as a black man. What was it? How did it happen? Very long story. Don't think I can do that in 10 minutes. But I think I can talk about part of the thing that made me go public. Or, well, it's a complicated thing. But the book I'm thinking about right now, and it has to be books because I tend to be a literate kind of person, and I think if you think enough about this, and how many times have I gone through life people telling me you take yourself too seriously, and I know there are books in me, and I have to write them, and my dad's going to crucify me if I don't. He doesn't believe the internet is real. He thinks all this writing that I've done, all the websites that I've built, all the conversations that I've had, all the forums that I've been involved with, it's not a real publishing house. It's not a real book. You really ought to write a book. And he's right. I ought to write a book, and I will write a book, but probably not until I retire. But anyway, I'm into the book thing, and I'm saying into the book thing. I'm vibing with writers. I mean, there have been many times in my life where, given a choice between staying at home and going out, I say, well, who am I going to meet tonight that has read the books I've read, or the book that I'm reading right now is more interesting than anybody I'm going to find out in the town, so why bother? And that was kind of the story of my 30s until I got married. But the book that I'm keying in on right now is Theodore Cross. And I came across Theodore Cross's book, The Black Power Imperative, somewhere around 1986 or something around there. And I was just absolutely floored by the book. It was a big, thick one, 400 pages or so, and it's full of charts and graphics, and basically said, why do African Americans need to have any special politics that extend what was coming out of the Civil Rights Movement? And the reason he gave was empirically demonstrable, which is basically you're a citizen of the United States, so you should have representation. And now that I look at it in retrospect, there's a rather big presumption that he probably still has the most credible argument on that, and it's an interesting thing I like to take up on. But the presumption is, of course, that and let me qualify one more thing, because this is something that Lani Guinier has taken up, and she has some very interesting points on democracy and representation, which is it reasonable to believe that folks who are not black can work in the best political interests of black folks? And you don't necessarily know that it's true or false until you do some empirical studies and say, okay, well, what did the black electorate want, and then what did it get? And from that perspective, you could say, and he certainly could say in 1986 when I read the book, and I don't know exactly when it was published, but that for all the black folks in the United States, we were not being adequately represented. And you could run the numbers any number of ways. And I really ought to take a second look at this book. But this was the impetus, because the case was made so profoundly clear, which was basically a lack of democracy, a lack of representation for the African American electorate is the benchmark for where we are lacking in democracy. So if you have an ideal of what democracy ought to be, you are falling short of that to the extent that these people are not represented, and you are really not being a true democracy. These days, I think more in economic terms, and I see that as rather an equilibrium. And I see this equilibrium in a lot of things. But at the time, certainly for me as a young black man, the Black Power imperative was a stunning revelation, and it energized a lot of my politics and got me going into my public aspect of my career, because there was no question in my mind that a demonstrably better representation of African American interests were in the interests of everyone, because that would mean that we would be vested into a political process rather than an extra political process, which leads down the road to revolution, which of course gets bloody, and it would undo the progress made in terms of the joint spirit of Americans coming together in the civil rights movement to improve the country, to improve the state of democracy in America, to make America live up to its promise. So I find that the book is still fairly widely cited. I don't think there's been anything like it written since, and I would say that was a very important book in my development of my political views, starting back in 1986. Theodore Cross, The Black Power Imperative. Now, this is Michael David Cobb Bowen. This is Cobb Vision. Peace.